The most convincing apology you've ever received might be the reddest flag you never noticed. By the time this ends, you'll have a simple way to tell the difference between a person who is just difficult and a person who is quietly rewriting your sense of reality every time you get close to catching them. Not a diagnosis, not a personality quiz, a pattern built from 5 specific moments that most people live through a dozen times before they ever name it correctly. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it in the person you are already thinking about right now. Sign 1 starts before you even know something is wrong because it doesn't look like a warning. It looks like being chosen. Picture this: you meet someone and within weeks they are calling you the most interesting person they've ever met. They remember details you mentioned once. They show up exactly when you need them. It feels less like a relationship and more like being cast in the lead role of someone else's story. Psychologists call the early phase of this love bombing, an intensity of attention and flattery designed less to connect with you than to secure something researchers call narcissistic supply, a steady stream of admiration the narcissist needs to regulate their own self-image. Difficult people are inconsistent because life is inconsistent. This is different. This charm is not warmth, it is an investment, and investments expect a return, whether that return is admiration, attention, or simply your agreement that they are exactly as impressive as they claim to be. The moment you stop generating that return, stop admiring, stop agreeing, stop needing them so visibly, you'll watch the temperature in the room change. But the charm itself isn't even the part that should worry you most, because it gets harder to spot from here. Sign 2 shows up the first time something actually goes wrong between you. A difficult person, confronted with a mistake, might get defensive, might sulk, might argue too hard. But eventually, most difficult people can say the words, "I was wrong." Watch what happens instead here. You bring up something that hurts you, calmly, carefully, choosing your words in advance so there's no way to misread your tone, and somehow, within minutes, you're the one apologizing. Psychologists have a name for this reversal: DARVO, short for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. The facts of what happened don't change. What changes is who ends the conversation feeling guilty. Picture this: you finally work up the nerve to say, "That comment hurt me," and by the end of the exchange you're comforting them for how hard it was to hear that. That's not conflict. That's a redirect executed so smoothly you don't notice the sleight of hand until hours later, lying awake, replaying it. And even that isn't the most unsettling part. What comes next is quieter, and that's exactly the problem. Sign 3 is the hardest to catch because on the surface it can look like the opposite of the problem. Narcissism isn't always cold. Plenty of narcissists cry at the right moment, say the right comforting sentence, show up to the funeral. Researchers distinguish between cognitive empathy, the ability to correctly read what someone else is feeling, and effective empathy, actually feeling something in response to it. Many narcissists have the first fully intact and the second running on empty. Picture this: you're mid-breakdown, telling them about the worst week of your year, and their response is technically perfect. Right words, right tone, right pause. But something in you, some old animal instinct, registers that no one is actually home behind those eyes. That gap between the performance and the feeling is exhausting to be near, even when you can't explain why. It's the difference between someone holding your hand and someone who has simply read somewhere that this is the moment where hand-holding is expected. And once you notice it once, you start noticing it everywhere in them. But sign 4 is the one that makes people doubt their own memory. Sign 4 is the one that does the most damage because it doesn't just distort a single conversation, it distorts your ability to trust yourself. This is gaslighting, and the word gets thrown around loosely now. So here is the precise version: a repeated pattern of denying, minimizing, or contradicting someone's accurate memory of events until they start doubting their own perception rather than the other person's honesty. Picture this: they said something cruel at dinner, in front of people. You both remember it happening. A week later, when you bring it up, they look at you like you've lost your mind. That never happened. You're remembering it wrong. You're always so dramatic. A difficult person might deny doing something because they feel ashamed. This is different. This is calm, repeated, and aimed specifically at your grip on what's real. And the unsettling part is that it works slowly on nearly everyone. The last sign is the quietest, and somehow the most telling. Sign 5 doesn't announce itself in any single moment. It shows up over months in the shape of the conversations you keep having. Picture this. You call to share good news, a promotion, an achievement you worked years for, and within 4 minutes the conversation has pivoted to their week, their stress, their achievement from years ago that was somehow bigger. This pattern connects to what psychologists describe as grandiosity, an inflated, self-referential sense of importance that doesn't just show off. It quietly reorganizes every interaction so that the narcissist remains the central character, even in stories that were never about them. A difficult person can be self-absorbed in a moment, distracted, having a bad day. A narcissist reorganizes your entire relationship's gravity around themselves permanently without ever seeming to notice they've done it. You'll find yourself months in instinctively downgrading your own news before you even share it, bracing for the pivot before it happens, and calling that instinct politeness instead of what it actually is. None of these 5 signs is damning on its own. Everyone gets defensive sometimes. Everyone has a self-absorbed week. What separates a difficult person from a narcissist isn't any single behavior, it's the pattern underneath all of them. A difficult person struggles to manage their own reality. A narcissist manages yours. That's the sentence worth remembering. Difficult people struggle with themselves. Narcissists rearrange the people around them. And this isn't only about the one person you might be picturing right now. Every relationship, every family, every workplace, every friendship runs on an unspoken agreement that both people are operating from a shared version of events. The moment one person quietly edits that shared reality to keep themselves at the center, everyone else starts adapting without realizing they've stopped trusting their own judgment. It happens at the scale of one relationship, and it happens at the scale of entire families and workplaces, where a whole group of otherwise perceptive people quietly agrees to stop noticing something, because noticing it out loud costs more than staying quiet does. That's the broader truth hiding inside all of this. Control doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like an apology. So here's something you can actually do tonight, with no confrontation required. Think of the person these 5 signs brought to mind and ask yourself one question. After your last hard conversation with them, did you walk away more sure of what happened or less sure? Difficult people leave you frustrated. Narcissists leave you confused about your own memory. That difference is the test, and unlike a diagnosis, it's one you can run again and again, quietly, without ever needing them to agree to it. Which brings us back to that apology, the one you were so relieved to receive. Look at it again, now that you know what to check for. Was it an admission, or was it a performance timed perfectly to end the conversation before you could finish your sentence? You already have the answer. You've had it for a while. So tell me, when you picture that person, which of these 5 signs did you recognize first, and were you the one who caught it, or someone else who had to point it out to you? If any of this sounded familiar, don't look away from it just yet. Sit with it a little longer than feels comfortable. That's usually where the real answer is hiding.